Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening. I was noticing the outcry, so I'm kind of starting backwards from the title that I have here, but it all is connected. You have the NRA and you have this upsurge in ghost guns, and you have this outcry about the massacre that happened in the Florida school shooting. And I was looking at some of the new developments involving this whole event. And in particular, what I found really disturbing is that there are these untraceable guns. And so apparently, this has already been going on, but now you've got people who actually can make guns and they can buy the parts. They can actually purchase parts online. And by law, legally, it's not an actual gun until they actually get all the little parts together to assemble it. And there are people that are always really good at putting things together. And the thing is that this is a war. There's a war going on, a silent war going on in terms of people who want to keep their weapons and people who want to unarm citizens from being able to obtain weapons. And then you have your criminal underground enterprises who they pretty much are stockpiled with weapons in all kinds of ways to smuggle weapons and bring weapons in and out of the country. And government, people that are crooked in government are involved in it. And you best believe that that is the reason why a lot of these things are going on. And when you look at these laws, they're really flawed because I was looking at Don Lemon, the news anchor, and he was talking to another person about the laws of obtaining guns and legal age limit. And they brought up the issue of being able to obtain a handgun is harder than obtaining a, a rifle. And that brings into question the whole incident behind the young man that was able to bring that weapon to the school and do the damage that he had committed recently. To be able to obtain that weapon, it was legal. So he was within the rights of law to be able to obtain the weapon, and that's a huge problem there. His background, even though he may have had some emotional problems, he was able to obtain the weapon under the guidelines or the guise of the law. And so this poses a huge problem because honestly, you cannot police everyone. And then you have regular citizens who are afraid, regular people who are law abiding, so to speak, citizens. And And a lot of times people will own a gun because not just so much because they use it for sports or hunting, but there's a lot of fear out there because people are worried about maybe some crazy natural disaster and something crazy breaking out, like some type of a civil war. You know, there are people that are out there that are worried about the inevitable. And even though they may not walk around talking about it, there's that fear. And so there are, believe it or not, there are lawyers that are equipped, that know the laws of being able to own a gun versus, you know, how you're supposed to, you know, have it on you, if you're supposed to have it on you, what kind of paperwork you're supposed to have, the do's and the don'ts of owning a gun, purchasing a gun under the laws. And then there's some people who are not concerned about those laws. Their thing is going underneath and around those laws, underground, and purchasing untraceable weapons. So I thought that this was interesting here because I was looking at this and I thought it was pretty disturbing, yet it was an eye-opener, and it was explaining some of the things that people will go at lengths to do in order to have a gun, even if it means criminal activity. A lot of times what happens is people don't realize that these ghost guns, actually, this is not anything short of being new. This has been around. It's just now it's more a prevalence of it because of these fights with the NRA and with these gun laws and with these multiple shooting incidences. And so now all these people who are looking at the whole idea around gun and gun safety and, you know, laws and who should have a gun and who shouldn't have a gun, it's now become a hot topic, especially with what has just occurred. And so even with the outcry of the students, there are students that are getting together in Florida. They're going to hold a rally. They're going to hold marches. They're trying to get the response from Donald Trump about the gun laws. And so I'm going to play this clip, and then I'm also going to go into more recent response on the whole issue around guns. And here it is right here, this clip about the ghost guns. And they're untraceable, and it's a challenge. And so this defies all of the laws. So in other words, what it's basically saying to you is that it's just like any other criminal enterprise. Whenever there are laws, there's always some people out there that are going to find ways to break them or go around them. So without further ado, here's a clip.
This handgun looks and fires just like a Glock 9mm. It has no serial number, it's completely untraceable, and it's 100% legal. It's known as a ghost gun, and we bought one online with no background check or waiting period. It's not technically a firearm because the part that would be registered, the lower receiver, still needs work. The do-it-yourself kit came with all the necessary parts, even the drill bits and a plastic template showing exactly where to drill the holes.
It's not going to take a tremendous amount of gunsmithing skill.
Former LAPD SWAT officer Scott Reeds agreed to supervise while I built.
We're removing these black tabs.
Following an instructional YouTube video, it took less than 3 hours to build.
How'd I do? Well, looks like you did pretty well for a novice.
After a safety check and test firing, Reeds put the gun through its paces. Feel all right?
Yeah.
Ghost gun. Unserialized.
Countless sites offer so-called ghost gun kits for everything from handguns to AK-47s.
They're trying to appeal to a certain segment of the population. Felons who can't go to a gun store and legally purchase a firearm, or people that just don't want the government knowing what type of firearms they have.
ATF agent Dave Hamilton showed us several different ghost guns. Many had come off the streets. They recently confiscated 46 in a raid at a single home.
There's nothing that ATF can do.
Ginger Colburn is also the ATF.
These firearms are with gang members. These firearms are being found at various crime scenes all over the country.
Police say unregistered homemade guns were used last November when Kevin Neal killed 5 people in a Northern California shooting spree, and in 2013 when John Zawari shot and killed 5 in Santa Monica.
Why can't the ATF just go shut down the people that are selling these parts?
ATF can't go shut down the people who are selling these parts because these parts are not regulated.
And there's no limit to the number of ghost guns one person can own.
It's really up to those companies to be responsible. They're the ones that are going to have to live with themselves.
Authorities say they're now beginning to see ghost guns show up at gun shows. It's a 50-year-old law that makes it legal to own ghost guns, and it would take an act of Congress to change that. We plan to turn ours into police. Jeff?
Carter Evans, thank you very much.
And so the next video that you're seeing is showing an actual gun lawyer. And, you know, so there are lawyers that will protect certain individuals through the guise of law in owning guns. So you just heard it there, folks. So there's always ways around the legality issues that we're dealing with right now in terms of the gun argument. And so I noticed that Trump says he supports improving background checks on gun owners. And that's what the White House is saying. And so this is scripted, of course. And it says that on Monday, Trump supports the improvement of federal system background checks on gun ownership in the wake of last week's mass school shooting in Florida. So the press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, said that Mr. Trump spoke Friday with the Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas about the legislation he proposed with Senator Chris Murphy, Connecticut Democrat, in improving federal compliance in criminal background check legislation. But if we stop on that right there alone, if you just heard in that other video, here we got ghost guns. They don't even have to do a background check. So that throws that whole thing out the window right there. But to go on with this issue here of what they're writing, they're talking sort of to try to appease to the masses of individuals who are, you know, hurting behind the incidences of what has just occurred. They want government to step in and do something about these guns falling into the hands of these people who have either mental illness or they're involved in some type of, you know, militant group that has a specific agenda. So it goes on to talk about the discussions are ongoing and the revisions being considered, that the president is supportive of the efforts to improve the federal background checks. And then it goes on talking about a bill is aimed to strengthen the federal background check database following the mass shooting at the church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, the 26 people that died. It seeks to ensure the federal and state authorities accurately reporting relevant information, including criminal history and the national instance of criminal background check systems. Notice where they keep talking about background check, criminal history. Well, criminals, if they have a history of criminality, do you think that they want to go through purchasing a gun to go through a background check when they know that you're not going to allow them to have a gun? So we just heard in the video that they've got these ghost guns for people who are fitting under that umbrella that you speak of. So they're not going to have to go into the store and purchase a firearm when they can go online and they can get the parts and put the stuff together in under 3 hours. And then they may go to somebody who has a black market and they have the guns already set up, the ghost gun set up, and there's a whole criminal enterprise behind it. And so it goes on to go on with the yada, yada, yada of all of this to appease to these people who are distraught, who are disturbed, who are angered and enraged at how they can allow for something like this to happen. Well, this doesn't sit well when you hear about the untraceable ghost guns, does it? So that's the sad part about this. It's really a sad situation because it makes it so sad that people feel hopeless. And so you do have people who fear that something really bad could happen, where you can have this uprising of individuals. And so also people feel like their rights are being violated because they're not able to have their amendment rights in order to own firearms. And so there's a lot of craziness going on, And so this is where it gets really sickening, because almost always, you hear these horrible stories of innocent people who fall victim to this stuff. And, even in Black culture, they talk about how originally they didn't want Black people to have guns because of, the whole thing behind slavery and the anger and the frustration. But then you have just a world of wars and of anger and of frustration and of different, political battles. And then now you have this underworld here of people who can just make guns. Here we got an extraordinary engine that just constantly has different social media websites and places that you can view things, and you can hear about how to make food, and you can hear about how to save money. And oh yeah, you can hear about how to grow, plants and your own, try to make homemade medicines. And you can also learn about how to actually make guns. So you notice you don't hear so much about that. I did see, though, however, I saw there was one short clip in the news about the ghost guns. And it didn't stay on very long, but I guess because they realized that that is a whole nother animal that they'd have to deal with, and that they have not really scratched the surface yet on how to put control over that. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are other people involved behind the scenes, and that this, like they said, has gone on for a long time. And nobody's really said anything about it because there's money involved in this. Can you imagine somebody that is able to put together certain guns through ordering parts, making guns, engraving them with certain little symbols that refer to particular, militant groups or gangs or even, criminal enterprises? They don't really put like any numbers on it. It's untraceable. People know where to go to get this stuff. And you don't have to look very far from what I'm seeing. And so this is a huge problem. So I don't know if anybody has noticed this, but this has gotten out of control and it's sad. So I was also looking at how you have the youth in Florida. And the youth in Florida has a right to be upset over what just happened. And so you have right here students who lived through the student shooting, the school shooting, turn rage into an activism. So now it has become an activist thing. So we have a new protest that has popped up behind the Parkland shooting. So the Parkland shooting survivors push for gun reform. And what did I just show you? What did I just talk about? The ghost guns. And for young people who are very, very creative, who are very influential, they are all over scouring social media. You don't think they haven't run across these ghost guns? And so there's a huge problem here going on. So this was about 16 hours ago. So there's a lot of frustrations that are going on right now in Florida. There are people that are saying no weapons. There's a push. In the aftermath of the Parkland High School mass shooting, students are leading the way, calling for gun reform. On Sunday, the survivors announced that they're planning to march this spring in Washington, D.C., a day after the criticized lawmakers and the National Rifle, which is the NRA, at an emotional rally in Fort Lauderdale. So it is in a full upswing. So Parkland, Florida high school shooter, while it calls for the gun reform, it's growing louder and louder. The calls of these young people are outcrying. They want their voices heard. The Florida Sentinel newspaper spoke with the family that took Nicholas Cruz into their home after his mother's death. We had this monster living under our roof and we didn't know. So the adoptive parents are saying that they didn't know that he was the way he was. They knew he was like he was. They saw all the signs. If other people, neighbors saw the signs, I don't know if you've seen any of the news footage, but neighbors, people who didn't even live with this kid, said that he was very unruly and that he was a little monster. So if they saw it, how could the adoptive parents not have seen it? I just think they don't want any involvement with it because it's gotten so much press coverage and so much notoriety, and they feel a sense of guilt. That's my take on it. But Kimberly Sneed told the paper, we didn't see this side of him. Okay, these are the adoptive parents. And just 5 days prior to the shooting, Kimberly Sneed had taken Cruz to her own therapist. The Sneed's gun owners, their gun owners themselves, say that they made Cruz put his guns in a safe, insisting that they didn't know until the massacre on Wednesday that he had kept a key. They didn't know he had a key to get in there to get his gun. First of all, they allowed him to have the gun. Okay, I'll just move on, but I think there's a lot of holes in that statement. The principal, Marjorie Stoneman, Douglas High School, Ty Thompson, posted an emotional video to the school community. As classmates were laid to rest this weekend, some of those students announced a national march on Washington to demand action on gun control. Earlier today, I spoke by way of Skype with another survivor. So this person, I guess, did some interviewing with some of the students. So there's been several interviews of the students' names, and how they feel about their version of what should be done about all of these issues. So I believe these are names of people that they Skyped with and talked to over the gun issue incident. And so there's this big call to gun reform. So this goes back on the NRA again. And so during the campaign trail of Donald Trump, didn't they talk a lot about gun reform? Well, they talked about not messing with the NRA and not taking away people's guns, and that it was a right to have people to have guns. And you know, we had a sheriff, and I believe it was in Chicago. If I'm not mistaken, his name was Clark, right? I'm looking him up now because, you know, yeah, his name was Sheriff. So it was Sheriff Clark. So he was the one that, you know, there were a lot of African-American people who were not very happy of him because they felt like he was more like a Sambo type dude, and that he promoted, you know, pretty much he promoted hurting his own kind, you know, and using sort of a militarized police enforcement over policing Black communities. And I believe it was in Milwaukee. I may not even be spelling it right, of course, but it's Sheriff David Clark, actually, I believe his name is. And I think he resigned, actually. Yep. And so he's actually even on Wikipedia. And so he's like really involved in, he's a former American law enforcement official who was sheriff of Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, actually. And there's a lot of controversy. His name is David Alexander Clark Jr. And so there's a lot of controversy behind that sheriff. It said that, too, he was temporarily blocked on Twitter. And I guess he violated something. There was something. He actually was for like he was like pro-gun rights. And he was, I think he's a member of the NRA. So he had like walked on stage and talked about, you know, the amendment and how, you know, he was more pushing for, you know, guns to be a right of citizens. And so there's a two-edged sword in this. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with all of the statements that this sheriff guy made, because a lot of the stuff he did was really, really, like, you know, controversial. I'll say that in terms of the Black community. He wasn't really favored wholeheartedly from everyone. But when it gets really sticky, because I believe that the NRA has a lot to do with what is going on in the White House as well. And so there are gun lobbyists. And so gun politics in the US is a big deal, has always been. And so, in other words, advocacy groups influence politics. The politics is through lobbying. And so some of the groups use lobbying firms while others employ in-house lobbyists. And according to the Center of Response Politics, gun politics groups with the most, they have the most lobbyists. So the NRA institutes Legislation Action, NRA, ILA, they are involved a lot in the White House. There's an intertwine of all of this. And so I remember, I don't know if any of you remember, that Donald Trump, he actually supported the NRA. And I think there was also a bill, and they don't talk about that. Bill Donald Trump, he signed recently, and they're quiet about it now that this massacre happened. And so there was even a photo. You know how he takes photos when he signs things into law. And so here there's a lot of articles that says Trump blames Democrats for the lack of gun control laws. Dems could have passed gun control under Obama. Florida shooting, White House won't release photos of Trump signing the bill loosening the gun. There we go. And so you notice this little thing is tucked away. All the other signings Trump was happy to have photographed on February 28th of 2017. Here is a photo of Donald Trump, okay? He signed a law here. Okay, so the White House is refusing to release the images. Donald Trump signing HJ Resolution 40, a piece of legislation that repealed Obama-era regulations that would have kept tens of thousands of mentally ill Americans from purchasing firearms. Okay, and so it goes into the bill that Trump signed into law that came under renewed scrutiny after it was reported that the gunman charged in the mass shooting Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, had a history of mental illness and was still able to buy a gun. So the CBS News and the White House press secretary Huckabee Sanders responded to its repeated request April 19, 2017, writing only, "We don't plan to release the picture at this time because of all the outcry and the outpour of all these students and all these people who lost loved ones behind this massacre." So that's why they're not releasing it. And it's just really, really not a good time to do that, is it? So the news said it asked the White House again if it would release the photos of the signing, but received no response. So the president, just then over a month into the administration, was hardly camera shy. February 2017, the day he had hosted 3 separate signing ceremonies that were open to the press. As for the 4th, no media was present for the signing, but the CBS reports that the White House photograph confirmed the pictures were taken. And so you see who is there, and you see him signing, and this is President Donald Trump, who holds a historically Black Colleges University HBCU executive order after signing it. So that's the reason why you have them in the Oval Office. And so this had to do with historical Black colleges, and he signs that. He also signs other bills, and he takes photos with him. He speaks and signs the waters of the United States, which is the WOTUS, Waters of the United States, February 28th, the Roosevelt Room. Executive order and directs Environmental Protection Agency within the water of the U.S. Rule expanded enough waterways and federally protected under the Clean Water Act. These are like photos of him signing things. And so the release of the photos having to do with the gun thing, they didn't want to release that. So that one, this I'll show you. Okay. This is what it says here. This I'll show you under this photo. Could we assume that this may be the one that they didn't want people to see? Possibly. Not sure. But much like all the other photos, they all look similar. Just, you know, he might be smiling, opening his hands, but it all ends up being the same thing. So I just thought this was interesting. It's just me again, of course, but it is a big deal. And this is a problem in American society, is the guns, and it's all over the country. And it's not just here in America, but speaking specifically about what's happening here, that this has been a huge problem. So you can actually go online and you can purchase the parts. And I'm going to replay this again because this video is not very long. And I thought it was an excellent example as to how easy it is for people to actually get their hands on these weapons, even if they are somebody that is from a criminal background, they have a felony, they, you know, are not able to pass a background check. You can virtually find these guns on the street, literally, if you know who's who that sells them, makes them, and you can actually have a gun in your possession, untraceable, unmarked. And, you know, by the time they find it, you know, who knows? People can probably also, if they can put them together, they can take them apart. And none the wiser. So I'm going to play this in closing. I'm going to play this video once more so that you'll see that this is a huge issue. And this would tie into this whole thing with the gun stuff.
Like Carter Evans shows us. This handgun looks and fires just like a Glock 9mm. It has no serial number, it's completely untraceable, and it's 100% legal. It's known as a ghost gun, and we bought one online with no background check or waiting period. It's not technically a firearm because the part that would be registered, the lower receiver, still needs work. The do-it-yourself kit came with all the necessary parts, even the drill bits and a plastic template showing exactly where to drill the holes.
It's not going to take a tremendous amount of gunsmithing skill.
Former LAPD SWAT officer Scott Reeds agreed to supervise while I built.
We're removing these black tabs.
Following an instructional YouTube video, it took less than 3 hours to build.
How'd I do? Well, it looks like you did pretty well for a novice.
After a safety check and test firing, Reeds put the gun through its paces. Feel all right?
Yeah.
Ghost gun, unserialized, unregistered.
Countless websites offer so-called ghost gun kits for everything from handguns to AR-15s and AK-47s.
They're trying to appeal to a certain segment of the population, felons who can't go to a gun store and legally purchase a firearm, or people that just don't want the government knowing what type of firearms they have.
ATF agent Dave Hamilton showed us several different ghost guns. Many had come off the streets. They recently confiscated 46 in a raid at a single home.
There's nothing that ATF can do.
Ginger Colburn is also with the ATF.
These firearms are with gang members. These firearms are being found at various crime scenes all over the country.
Police say unregistered homemade guns were used last November when Kevin Neal killed 5 people in a Northern California shooting spree, and in 2013 when John Zawari shot and killed 5 in Santa Monica.
Why can't the ATF just go shut down the people that are selling these parts?
ATF can't go shut down the people who are selling these parts because these parts are not regulated.
And there's no limit to the number of ghost guns one person can own.
It's really up to those companies to be responsible. They're the ones that are going to have to live with themselves.
Authorities say they're now beginning to see ghost guns show up at gun shows. It's a 50-year-old law that makes it legal to own ghost guns, and it would take an act of Congress to change that. We plan to turn ours into police. Jeff?
Carter Evans, thank you very much. Arming yourself with a...
So there it is, folks. And that's pretty much how it goes. And that is the challenge here in America, is if you do have this reform, you still have this criminal enterprise of ghost guns, and people will figure out a way, and they will stop at nothing to purchase or even make a gun that is untraceable. Thanks for listening.